Dear reader, I'm Tony and this is Book Text. It's time for another Friday Reads and a Victober update. But first, our word of the day is a word that I stumbled across in Charlotte Bronte's Shirley, which I was reading this week. And I recognized it because I studied Old English and Middle English in graduate school. And I thought it was odd and unusual that it was showing up in a Victorian, which is modern English novel. It is the word yclept. Yclept means called, named. So it is used as, a lady yclept Shirley would be how you would use it. It is sometimes used in modern English as kind of humorous. I'm not entirely sure why it shows up every once in a while, but it does. So now you know what it means when you come across it, yclept. So I have not completed any books this week. I did not finish any. I did continue many. I'm almost done with a couple of books. So not that I had a bad reading week, I just didn't finish anything. I spread my reading across several things instead of going really in-depth on one book. So I'm not going to be ashamed about that, actually. I was going to say I'll be ashamed, but I'm not going to be ashamed about that because I'm still enjoying what I'm reading. So of the books that I am currently reading and will soon finish is an audiobook called Queen Victoria by Lucy Worsley. I'm still reading that from last week, and it's really interesting. I'm approaching the end of Victoria's life, and the stories just get kind of more and more sad. She lost a lot of people that she loved dearly, and so it's interesting to see how she began her reign, but also as her reign is coming to a close and her life is coming to a close, what is happening with her. So I will be finishing that book this week, and I've enjoyed it so far. It was very interesting nonfiction, and I don't read a ton of nonfiction outside of work, so it's been delightful to read something that was it's informing my reading in the fiction books. So that's one of my current reads. Another thing that I've been reading really slowly, you're going to hear about this in every Friday Reads for a while, is Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman. I'm just kind of browsing through it now. I read it pretty consistently, maybe a couple pages a day. It is pretty dense. It's also nonfiction, and the language is, of course, from the late 18th century, early 19th century. So it takes a lot of brain power to get through it. But I am just loving Mary Wollstonecraft. I've mentioned that in every Friday Read since I started reading her. But I'm really enjoying this book. I hold it close to my heart every time I finish a couple of pages. And I'm still taking a lot of notes from it. So that also slows down my reading quite a bit. So I'm currently still reading that. Another book that I'm going to finish in the next few days, if not today, is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is the first of his Barchester chronicles, and it is, so last week I was not quite sure how to think about Anthony Trollope's writing style, because this is my first Trollope, and he's quite prolific. I would love to read more, especially in the Barchester series, but I wasn't sure how to describe his writing style and if I liked it. And I have come to a decision on that. I do enjoy it because his strength to me is in writing about interiors, meaning he's not going to describe a landscape or an exterior of a building or even an exterior of a person very, very in a lot of detail. He's going to focus on interiors, the inside of a home. There's a home that he keeps describing that is just paragraphs and paragraphs of quaint details that really tell you a lot about the people who live there. But he also does kind of interior dialogue really well. You can see what the characters are thinking and feeling, what they're going through as they process the events in their lives. So I have identified that about Trollope, and I think I like it. It's not my favorite writing style choices. I do prefer lots of exterior descriptions, but there's nothing bad about interior descriptions. They have their own advantage. for reading and understanding the characters and the plot. So I will finish this pretty soon, and I am enjoying a lot of the references to Victorian culture, right? So biblical references, Greek mythology, things that they would be studying at this time have been really fun. So I'm hoping to finish this soon and to give it a high rating. Then, of course, I'm still reading through Charlotte Bronte's Shirley. I have just been absolutely adoring this book. I know some people have not enjoyed it as much, but I'm really liking it. I love the characters. I love the descriptions. I enjoy the slowness of the plot. You know, it not a lot happens, and I'm okay with that. Her descriptive writing style, though, is I think my favorite thing about Shirley. Just the descriptions of the landscape, the seasons as they change, descriptions of the characters and what they're doing. They are exterior descriptions as opposed to Anthony Trollope's interior descriptions, but I find that I prefer that. So I'm about halfway through. In fact, I'm just past the halfway point. So I'm a little bit ahead, but I also have to turn this back into the library just before the end of October, so I do need to finish a couple of days early. But I'm definitely thinking this is going to be a 5-star read and a one that I'll have to purchase my own copy of and then reread. Then I just started the other day Louise Penny's Bury Your Dead. This is not a Victober read. This is my one non-Victober read. And it is a murder mystery. It is in the Inspector Gamache series, set in Three Pines, Canada. And so far, I've met a group of kind of really quirky characters, almost Dickensian characters, who run the literary and historical society of this town. And they work out of the library, and they had a board meeting, and it was kind of fun to see all the little workings of possibly small town life. I'm not quite sure how big this town is. And a character has just arrived, and I know somebody's going to end up dead in the library, and I just can't wait to see how this unfolds. Also, something is very wrong with Inspector Gamache. We met him briefly at the very beginning of the first chapter, and something went wrong, and I am looking forward to also unraveling that mystery. So there's a lot to love about this book. It's very, it's set in kind of late fall, early winter, but even though that's not quite what we're experiencing right now, I'm enjoying the seasonal appropriateness of a murder mystery. I also, even though I didn't finish Trollope, I started reading Gaskell because I wanted to get it finished in October. So I started reading Elizabeth Gaskell's Sylvia's Lovers. And so far, all I've discovered is the city of Monkshaven, which is the focus of chapter 1. It's entirely a description of Monkshaven and the events happening kind of in the outside world that are affecting Monkshaven. And that was really interesting to me. Of course, I have read Elizabeth Gaskell before. She's one of my favorite Victorian writers. This is not a book that I have read already. So it's really interesting to me to see that familiar writing style and the kind of familiar cadence of her sentences, the beautiful descriptions of the seascape and the beaches and the people in the town. It's delightful, so interesting. It is a historical novel, so she was writing in about the 1860s, I believe, 1863, and this is set in the 1780s, maybe 1790s, so about 70 years prior to when she was writing. So it's historical to me, but it's also historical to Elizabeth Gaskell, and it's interesting to see kind of the differences in maybe some of the research that she did to accurately describe that era. So I'm enjoying this one. I just kind of relished in the first chapter because it was so exquisitely described. So I'm really loving this Elizabeth Gaskell. I love a lot of things, but I think it's because I'm just pretty good right now at identifying books that I'm going to like. And I'm also willing to stick through to the end of some of these books. where I might, in other circumstances, want to DNF something. Right now, I've been able to stick with things to the end and enjoy that. I think my English major brain is kicking in. All that training as a student has kind of reminded me that, like, sometimes we're not reading for pleasure, we're reading for information, we're reading to analyze something, and that's kicking in right now. And so I'm doing that. I'm continuing to read, and then as I continue to read, I continue to enjoy. So those are what I'm currently reading. I'm hoping to pick up 2 books this week as I finish 2 books. One is, of course, an audiobook, so I'm hoping to pick up the audiobook of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I'm pretty familiar with the story as someone who reads and watches a lot of science fiction, but this is the story of a man in the Victorian era who invents a time machine and travels through time and experiences a really fascinating future. So I'm hoping that I will enjoy that. Last Victober, technically, I've read The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells for the first time and absolutely loved it. Also was super terrified by it. I did not expect it to be so modern in its descriptions of these horrific things. In particular, of course, in The War of the Worlds, it's the Martians and their machines. It was so familiar. It was so some of the movie adaptations were so close, so faithful to the book that I was really surprised at how cinematic the book sounded. And so I'm interested in seeing how my experience of watching several different versions of The Time Machine will play into how I read The Time Machine. I haven't watched one recently, so it should be kind of fresh. The book will be fresh in my mind. It won't be competing too much with the different versions. One of which was black and white and really interesting because of it. It was older, maybe 50s or early 60s was when that movie was produced. But I'm interested in seeing kind of how the actual original story played out. The other thing that I want to pick up is Thomas Hardy's The Woodlanders. This is, as far as I know, the story of a woodland people. That sounds like it's maybe a fantasy race, but just people who live in the woods, the forest, and a main character who is involved in a love triangle, involving an outsider and an insider. And so the kind of plays between different maybe classes of people will have an effect on this book. Also, Thomas Hardy is famous for his landscape descriptions, and I've read a couple of his works before, some short stories, and also The Mayor of Casterbridge, and I am looking forward to experiencing more of that exterior description, the exterior writing style. So I'm hoping to pick this one up soon, so soon. But of course, I'm quite ambitious when it comes to my TBRs. So there you have it. Those are my Friday reads, a little bit of a Victober update. I still have only finished one book for Victober, which is The Master of Ballantrae by Robert Louis Stevenson, which I talked about last week. But I'm soon to finish Queen Victoria by Lucy Worsley, nonfiction, and The Warden by Anthony Trollope. And so I'll give you some more updates on those when I do finish them. In the meantime, I'd love to hear, if you've read Trollope in particular, how would you describe his writing style? Is there another book that I should move on to after I've finished The Warden that you might think gives a better representation of his writing style? I would love to hear that. Of course, as well as what other things you are reading, or if you're participating in Victober, how you're progressing with that. And remember, there's always another book.